Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We have a very exciting presentation today. Today's session is about just understanding the importance of metrics and KPIs in the industries of professional services. So with me, we have several people who have quite a bit of expertise. Mark B will be speaking about some of his experience in the world of fractional CFOs, the important things that you want to monitor as in terms of metrics for an accounting organization and someone that's providing strategic CFO services. And then we also additionally have another speaker who's going to be talking about also his experience, Jack, about the world of consulting services, having spent multiple years at Boston Consulting Group. There is a infographic that we will be running together in this session. We'll share that on the screen very quickly. And along the presentation, if you have any questions, please let us know. And then we'll try to, Adriana will poll them or we'll try to answer them during the presentation. Okay. Give me 1 second, please.
Okay, Mark Blackton, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Well, my name is Mark Blackton, and I've been around a long time. It's amazing I'm still working. You know, I'm an entrepreneur. That's why I'm still working, because everybody talks about the sexiness of being an entrepreneur, but nobody talks about, it's like going to Vegas. We only talk about the wins. So I've been doing this. I've been pretty much a fractional service provider for the last 15 years. I do a couple of things. One is I work with people to help them understand the value of their business and work through some transitions. And the other thing that might be interesting to this group is that I've co-written a course called Freeway to Fractional, where we teach people to transition from their W-2 jobs to being fractional service providers. And it's not just fractional CFOs, but we're teaching people to be fractional in many different service areas. So if anybody wants to know more about that, please reach out to me. My background in KPIs is basically that they were always just something that should be done and rarely are, or rarely were, until I got involved. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about how they really affect my business and my clients' businesses.
Okay, thank you. Jack, you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to be with you today. My name is Jack Mizerak. I've also been at it a while. I've been in, I guess primarily you could call them business partner, internal CFO roles in a number of service industries. I wouldn't know the first thing about a manufacturing environment, but I think I know the service industries pretty well. So I've worked in hospitality, financial services, and most recently in consulting. So, you know, for me, you know, KPIs, you know, they're the things that drive your business. So to know what your KPIs are, to know that you have the right ones, and to be talking about them will help you drive success in your business.
Okay, excellent. So let's dive right in and I'll share my screen. So as a professional services organization, we'll start with some of the key objectives. And the key objectives could be really, look, we want to grow revenues, of course. And what that means is expanding our market reach, enhancing our service offerings, the products that we offer, improve and strengthen our customer relationships. Simultaneously, we want to have good efficiency in the metrics that are operating our business. We are focused on human capital, financial management, and also technology. We want to make sure that we're leveraging the right technology to improve operational efficiency across the organization. And of course, you have some sustainability and partnership and allies. I'm going to let Jack kind of go straight into kind of like the Boston Consulting Group guiding principles of an organization and how that might actually drive leadership to professional organizations. Jack, this looks very familiar for you. You want to dive in?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, a lot of companies say this, but I do believe that BCG is a purpose-driven organization. So these purpose principles, and I'm not going to read them, are very important to the organization, to the way it works. BCG will not take business that if they feel it sort of conflicts or doesn't align with, you know, the purposes and the values of the company. So we set these purpose principles. We try to live by them. We have core values and then other, you know, key principles by which we operate the company. So some of these, you know, thinking about KPIs for a minute, some of these are more measurable than others. But it is, you know, but it is the way that the leadership runs and operates the business.
Okay, thank you, Jack. And I've also added kind of like the effective service organization, some of the principles from, 10 principles from Harvard Business School. So looking at how you want to have cooperation, an organization for change, anticipating the future, some metrics and some guiding principles in terms of taking care of your people, empowering people, taking care of your high performers, and developing and fostering a leadership organization. So that's a section here by the Harvard School. Now, here's a section that's interesting for service organizations because we want to get to a point where either your business or the organization that you work for is having some network effect. And what network effect means is, one, you have direct network effect, people telling other people, but some indirect offering as well. So where you have complementary products and users benefiting, and you're actually matching the services you are with some of the organizations you're charting target as a customer. In terms of key priorities, across the services organization for professionals, we want to have growth, revenue growth, new customer growth, expansion growth, and also unit economics. And you also want to look at efficiency. And I'm going to ask Mark to kind of dive right into some of these metrics that he tracks and for a finance organization at a high level, because we'll go deeper into specific KPIs. Mark?
Thank you. First, I want to go back to what Jack talked about as purpose. I really believe that I often say that, you know, that old saying, cash is king, has now been changed to culture is king. And it really starts with having a purpose before you start measuring anything. So I really appreciated Jack mentioning that. People don't come to work to make you millions anymore. I mean, or just to get paid. So those are really probably more important in a lot of ways than all the work we're talking about today. So I really appreciate that opportunity to see that in this presentation. As far as priorities, I agree with all three of those. But what we also I'm just going to add is the customer satisfaction KPIs, right? How often are you recommended? How long have your customers been around? What percentage of your revenue comes from customers you've had for over 5 years? That's really, of all of the KPIs that we're going to talk about, I think that those are so quickly overlooked. It's really easy to put metrics around sales and, you know, how many widgets you make in an hour, those type of things. But digging into the real heart of it is we're here to serve our clients, and we have to have KPIs around them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark, because it's very expensive to take on a customer, get a customer. You want to keep them for a long time. The client retention rate, the dollar retention rate, and also at the end, can they refer you to other clients? That really drives efficiency for an organization.
Right.
Let's move into kind of like the marketing, because service organizations need to do some marketing as well. Mark, let me ask you kind of like how you look at marketing KPIs for your business and how accounting firms should look at marketing KPIs. It's not our core function, but it's still something that we need to do and kind of understand.
Well, I love it. I was with KPMG early in my career, and they said go out and sell, and that's all they said is here's how much you need to sell. We had no idea what we were doing. We were tripping around, and somehow we survived. But having items around marketing is really important, and basically you want to know where your customers are coming from. And I will suggest, as we talk about in the FENG all the time, that a large percentage of your customers should come from your current customers and from your referrals. Who's in your network? So you have to have KPIs around where your money, where your businesses are coming from, and then emphasize and prioritize working with them. So those are the main KPIs that I use.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, we can spend money in marketing, advertising, social media, what have you. But in the end, if someone is advertising for you, that cost of customer acquisition could be quite low. So that's a good point. Jack, there's a customer journey map at Boston Consulting Group or other companies. You spend a lot of time screening and finding the right customers. Can you just talk about the customer journey in terms of finding the customers all the way down to the multiple touch points, delivering the end product, ensuring satisfaction, and now you get to a very loyal customer that will be your advocate in the future?
Sure. So, so one of the things that's a little bit of a carryover from the points that Mark was making is that, there's marketing, there's cost of acquisition, but, in a professional services business, you're continually pitching to clients. Okay. So one of the things that's very important in customer acquisition is understanding why you won and why you lost. So keeping good data on that is very important. So what's my success rate? And for those that I won, why did I win? And for those where I lost, where did I lose? Was it price? Was it this? Was it capability, etc.? So to do a good job on customer journeys, I mean, I have to, as a professional services provider, I have to have credible expertise in what this prospective client needs. And so I need to show that I understand his or her problem, what's going on in their organization. And then I will try to tailor a solution to what they're facing. And it helps if I've done it before. But that's how I attempt to establish myself with this potential client. So then, hopefully, I win the business. I go in, I do the work, I show value, and that forms, and that creates hopefully a happy customer, a happy client, which then creates an ongoing relationship and creates referrals. So this kind of builds. If you do this right, it builds on yourself, builds on itself. So that's kind of the approach. Shortly, in a nutshell.
Okay, super helpful. And we'll actually revisit some of the metrics in a second. Mark, when you are creating product and dashboards for various industries in your business, here are some accounting KPIs. Can you touch on kind of like which ones are relevant for you internally and which ones are most relevant for your client customers in your
I'm having
business?
trouble reading that, Mark, so I apologize for my old eyes, but
Here,
there we go. That's helpful.
it's funny. We used to all make fun of our friends of the front side, but now we're doing it
The
ourselves.
glasses on. That's all good. Hey, I can't make fun of anybody anymore. I guess that's that experience. There's that wisdom right there. But I think, how do I answer this and not sound sort of silly, but all of these are important. And, obviously, everybody looks at net profit margin. And unfortunately, most of us can't break down net profit margin by customer or by product. And that gets really interesting. There's an old statistic out there that in manufacturing, up to 60% of what manufacturers make, they actually lose money on. I think that's very similar in the services business. We really don't keep track of how much it's costing us to provide services to our customers. Return on assets doesn't mean very much to me because
Okay.
assets are gone. They're sunk cost. But if I were a manufacturer, that'd be different. Okay. So just that. And I think that's the point. What are KPIs and how do we develop them? This sheet that Mark's put together, or you can go on AI and say, what are great KPIs for this? We couldn't do that a few years ago. It's amazing, right? And then start digging in and saying, what's important to me, right? What's important? What would help me make my business better? And for me, it's really, in my life, I've gotten away from hourly, and I start looking at the world in the capacity of my business. And am I getting paid a proper amount for the amount of capacity that I'm generating or deploying in that one company or that one customer? And that could be a webinar in and of itself. So I don't want to get too far away, but I have a feeling we should all start looking at the world a little differently, even though these are great KPIs. What do you need to run your business, and how do we get there? And then utilizing new technology so that we're not spending all of our time calculating these, which I think we'll get to a little later, won't we, Mark?
Okay, that's helpful. You touched on something that's I thought was insightful, which is profit per customer, profit per product. Jack, can you just talk about how add to that, which is not every customer is created equal, and how you think about that when you are servicing your clients?
Sure. At the end of the day, you can tell if you've made or lost money on a given client. So that is something that is knowable. But to Mark's point about all customers not being created equal, if you will, when you go in and price a new proposal, you have an idea of, okay, if I use these sorts of resources and the project takes 8 weeks, and the reason I know it takes 8 weeks is I've done something similar in the past. I know that this is for me to earn, kind of the margin I want to earn. This is $1 million project. Okay. However, there are circumstances that if this is a client that I've been dying to get in the door with and never have, I will discount my $1 million, right?
Sure.
And then sometimes I may know that I have pricing power, and I might go a little higher than my $1 million. So those all go into how we think about pricing. Now, another thing that's becoming a big factor in professional services and the consulting business is that clients are saying, geez, the $1 million is great, I get it, but I would like to have you have some skin in the game with me. So in many instances, or more instances than in the past, we are being asked to put some of our fees at risk. And so what might be, so I'm completely making this up, what might have been $1 million on a sort of a straight basis is that the client will say, all right, I'll pay you $800,000 straight, but that last $200,000 is going to be awarded based on if you help me achieve the success I'm looking for.
Sure.
So now you're trying to align the consultant or the professional services provider with the client. So that all makes sense. And if you're good at what you do, you shouldn't be afraid to do that. Now, where it can become a little tricky, however, is what's the right way to measure what you're trying to provide? So if you're doing an engagement where you're trying to cut costs, maybe that's a little bit more straightforward. You come up with a plan that the organization now costs less than it used to. Where it can be a bit trickier is on the revenue side. And, it can be hard to tell what the revenues would have been if you didn't do what you did, right?
Sure.
So let's just say the market crashes tomorrow. That may hurt you, what you're trying to do, versus there might be other things that bring revenues up that you had nothing to do with. So those value-based arrangements make a lot of conceptual sense, but there can be some challenges in the measurement.
Sure. And the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of nuance. Agreed. And
Let me
these are
jump in.
Mark-
Let me jump in there just for a second. I agree with what Jack said as far as being paid, but also selling based on value that we're creating and not just the hours and time we're putting into a project.
yeah.
Okay. So
And actually, we had a question. It was like on the same topic for Mr. Jack. Is it like a performance pay contract that when you were speaking about putting some of the fees at risk? I'm assuming that's what.
Yeah, it's similar, but the point that I was trying to make is just how being able to clearly define performance.
Yeah.
That's the part that can get tricky.
Mhm.
For example, in a marketing agency, it's like, hey, if you sign up with our marketing agency, we'll grow your revenues 30% above the baseline. However, the client would say, well, why don't we structure it so that if we do that, you get actually a percentage of that extra revenue growth versus paying you on an hourly rate.
And for me, when I'm working with value acceleration products, I have valuation software,
Yeah.
and it's not perfect, but it shows trends. You don't ever know what a business is going to sell for, but we look at these different matrices, these different matrix of value improvement opportunities, and we agree that if we move the arrow X a percent, then I get paid a bonus.
Yeah. Which makes sense, right? Internally, companies have an incentive, and as a partner, there should be some incentive alignment as well. Okay, let's move to kind of like industry specific data. And this is not us, but I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the KPIs by industry. So for example, if you are in the hotel services industry, look, your revenues from bookings, your EBITDA from enhanced, your profit margin per higher customers, these are your occupancy rate, expansion of dining services. That might be some of your KPIs. And then you have specific operational metrics that you want to keep track of. For example, the loyalty program and how that's differentiated to keep your customers so that everyone can earn a free night stay at the Hyatt. And then for higher education, the KPIs will be very different. You are looking at metrics such as endowment spending rate, net tuition revenue growth rates. Amazing how tuition rate growth is always twice the rate of inflation. You are looking at metrics such as teacher-student ratio, student-to-advisor ratio, research grant efficiency. Legal, you would have your own metrics. Everyone is thinking in 6-minute increments, so you want to optimize for that and optimize for your outcome. So management consulting, Jack, this is your area of expertise. You touched on a little bit. Maybe you could dive in kind of like how you think about others more granular metrics from a finance point of view for management consulting, providing strategic advice. Gone is the old day of, hey, we'll pay you $800 an hour. This is a project free, but this is kind of how we're structuring so that there's some skin in the game.
Okay, yeah, I'll speak at kind of 3 levels. So one is one of the things that's important to measure is the kind of the revenue productivity of your key resources. So every business has this measure, and in restaurants, it's covers an average check. In retail, it's sales per square foot. In professional services, it's how much revenue are your revenue producing people generating? Okay, so you might say, well, gee, one way to look at it is just to say how much of their time are they spending on revenue generating activities, and that that works, and that gives you some level of information. But what really kind of brings that to light or gives you a much richer information is if you look at the dollar amount of their opportunity and what they're realizing. So if I have a person whose billing rate is $250 an hour, if you do the math, that person works 2,000 hours over the course of the year. If he or she was billable for every one of those hours, she could generate $500,000. But you may have a person whose billing rate is twice as high, $500 an hour, and that's because they have more capability, they're more expensive, et cetera. So that person's potential is $1 million an hour. So the revenue that each generates versus their potential is a very important and illuminating statistic. So my person whose billing rate is $250 an hour, he might be doing great. But if the person that's $1,000 an hour or $500 an hour is not as strong, that's something that you'd want to know about your business. So that's kind of at the individual level. So then you go up to the engagement level, and we've talked about some of these already. Am I discounting? Am I earning a premium? When I undertake a case, it's fixed price. Okay, in a law firm, you bill for as many hours as it takes you to do a work. In a consulting firm, you make a commitment to a price up front, and that's what you have to live with. So did my cost of providing the service to the client fall in line with my initial expectations? Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. So that's at the project level. Also, the value component that we talked about a minute ago. And then at the firm level, obviously you do all this great business, you need to collect it. So DSO is a relevant metric. And then your support costs. Okay, so one of the things that is very common to look at is if I look at the cost of my support teams and relate that to either the cost of my billable teams or revenue producing teams, or the cost of my billable employees. So those are some of the things you look at sort of at all three levels of the organization.
Jack, just on the point where some people are highly paid, others have a lower rate, how does a company, a management consulting firm, kind of think about expenses as it relates to fixed and variable? For example, should everyone be a full-time employee, or should you have a mix of consultants that you bring on part-time, particularly for special cases, so that you're not paying them for potentially idle time?
Yes, it's a good question, Mark. So one of the things that was consumed a lot of my time in the jobs I've had is just having the right number of people, right? So if I have 10 of these with this particular expertise, but I only needed 5, then where you were just a minute ago, I have people sitting on their hands, right? So, but I do want to have what I need to deliver to the client.
Sure.
So there, if it's a very specific skill, you can do a couple of different things. One, you can have it in-house, but you recognize that it may not be as used as frequently as a more generalist resource. So that's one way to go. And then it is also a way to go to bring in an outside expert for for those specific instances. Now, obviously, that's someone you have to be comfortable with, because now he or she is representing your firm, and the client thinks of that person as your employee. Doesn't draw that distinction, So that's a way to get at the question you posed.
Okay, that's helpful. Just to pause and kind of give you a sense of how big this industry is. This is we are a services industry in this country, and professional services is about 3.5 trillion in terms of the market, and it's about 13% of the GDP. So pretty sizable. in North America. Mark B, I'm
Oh,
going.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, I just have Omar had a question. Are you utilizing Gen AI in assisting you in generating the KPIs for operational, financial, marketing, customers, et cetera, for specific companies?
You
Let-
can. I think you can use. I use a lot of kind of I use a lot of public company information as well to just kind of see where they should be. Just kind of like what metrics, what benchmarks should be, because a lot of these metrics depends on the size of the organization, specific industry, how long you've been around, and then your revenue growth profile that determines everything else. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools that you can use, specifically public companies that are out there, and they're more on the bigger side.
Yeah, I think it's just like using AI in general. It's a starting point.
Right.
It gives you an idea what you should use and what's available. But you have to look at your situation, your experience, and make sure you pick AIs that make sense and that you can actually utilize.
Yeah.
Right.
Mark, that's a good point. So let's talk about how you have various customers in as a consulting fractional CFO, and some of the metrics that kind of you're helping them with, and how you see your financial internal management, because at the end you're managing a business as well.
Again, every industry is a little different. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I have landscaping and snow removal companies. That sounds like they're small, but they're not. They make a lot of money. They have there's a lot of similarities in those KPIs. Um, Starting right there with gross profit margin and going on to utilization margins and whatnot. And then I have, consulting guys, that are making millions of dollars. Gotta try to be consistent. I think to get to your answer, I think that the things that I like in a business are net promoter score, which is
NPS, yeah.
NPS, client satisfaction and royalty. Are they going to promote me, whether I'm a landscaper or a financial consultant? Client retention rate is really important to me. Am I losing, am I just churning clients out? Are they just churning clients out? Right. Um, I like KPIs for measuring things like scope creep. I love that because I tell people I live on scope creep. Some people think that's a bad word, but as that just means that people are growing their demand for my services. I just can't do it for free. That's when it becomes a problem. So you need to keep a track of scope creep.
Mark, just on that, because when you go into a client, you're providing basic accounting and bookkeeping services that grows very quickly to a financial model, budget, variance analysis, all those other things, and KPIs for them. But then they're like, oh, now they're asking you for strategic advice. Do they go into this market? Do they expand? Do they divest? How do you kind of say, well, that's beyond scope. It's time to kind of revisit our SOW. What's kind of been the approach for you that
Well,
works?
well, so many people don't, they just eat it. And that's crazy. And the nice thing about for me is the, the, the resource I use for the, the analysis and the bookkeeping and whatnot are separate.
Mm.
So it's really easy for me to notice that all of a sudden I'm putting time into a project on the strategic and financial planning side. Uh, I think that customers understand that, but you have to be very clear initially what your scope is. And for me, I've set up my clients as in phases. Phase one is the analysis and getting the books and things organized. Phase two is doing an assessment of the business and growing, and at the end of that assessment is when we sit down and say, how much work do you need me to do? And what do you need done? And we sit down on a quarterly basis and review all of that. And if they're, it's two ways. One, I can tell if I'm not getting paid enough for the work I'm doing. And two, it's you find out if your clients are really dedicated to getting the jobs done, because most of the time when projects don't get done, it's not because the consultant or the service provider. It's usually because the client had to set a goal. They set a goal and it really wasn't one, and they didn't put the proper resources to it. So scope creep is just part of what we do. It should be expected. And actually, as I said, I live on it. I make more money on scope creep than the initial projects most of the time.
And sometimes I guess, Mark, you can say, look, in the initial SOW, these things are included, but these are extras, right?
It, and again, it just depends on how you sell yourself. If you're selling yourself as a commodity,
Mm.
you know, the X number of hours or X number of days a week or whatever that is, it's harder to talk about increasing fees. But if you're talking about this is what we're doing and this is what we can accomplish for you and this is the value of it, and oh, by the way, we've identified new items that you feel like you need help with to get there and to get to that value, right? You just shouldn't really be selling yourself as a solution for everything wrong with the business, but as part of the process of discovery. And I literally set myself up that whole thing that C-suite, we call ourselves CFOs. We're not doing the books. We're not, you know, we are there helping them strategically grow their business and helping them stay on track with their goals, their desires, their value proposition. So does
Yeah.
that help?
Yes, that's helpful because I think, some people will think, okay, and it happens in our discussion as well, where it's like, how much should I be charging as a fractional CFO? It's usually the billable hour that comes up versus kind of like, it's a little bit more nebulous, but if you do the work, there's more dollars ultimately in the value you provide and the partnership you build beyond the monthly retainer, I think.
I would agree.
Okay. Let's move on to kind of like some of the other sections here in terms of, let's see, employee metrics, because, we want to look at how much are people costing us, time, how quickly are they ramping, quality of hire, absentee rate, headcount growth, employee turnover rate. And of course, everyone is getting paid differently. There's an incentive alignment for bonuses and things like that. Jack, can you talk about growing and leading people in a people organization, the metrics that you look at when it comes to taking care of your team?
Sure. So, in a firm, and it's not BCG is not the only firm that does this, so I don't want to imply that it is. But you have the good fortune that you're growing a lot. So you want to hire people that are going to grow as the business grows. So after every consulting assignment, a BCG consultant, again, not just BCG consultants, but a consultant will get feedback on the work they've just done. So there's very much an investment in trying to bring those folks along, because the more skilled you can make them, the more value you can add, which enables you to get more business, charge more for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's very much in terms of metrics, obviously you're looking at turnover, you're looking at how quickly people progress, how quickly they're promoted, things like that. But in terms of philosophy is more like what I was just describing.
Okay, super helpful. Let's talk about inflation and just kind of like wage inflation, salary trends and things like that. And how do you kind of factor that in? Maybe Mark, you can talk about that, and Jack, you could chime in too. Every year we need to pay people a little bit more. How do we go back to our customers and say, hey, we need to charge you a little bit more as well?
Yeah, the reality is what was a $200,000 job is now a $300,000 job. It's just, eggs are 5 times more expensive. Everything's more. And I see this all the time in my client base and in other professionals. they got this $100 an hour thing in their brain, and that's a lot of money, and ultimately it's not, especially when you really do a budget and figure out how much money you need to live. So I haven't had any problems increasing my rates. Now, that's really hard it's like the delayed inflation, right? Small business owners, big companies increase the value, their sales prices almost on a daily basis, where small business owners, it takes them 2 years to realize their profit margin's nothing and they didn't do anything. So my suggestion here is figure out what the market is for your service and get there quickly, because you only have so much time and you're really selling so much capacity. You have to make money on it. Jack,
Do
have
you
you
let
found that?
do you let people know when you do an engagement that we're gonna kind of build that in the future with the CPI or whatever? There's a rate of it.
My contracts say that I revisit if they are hourly, or even if they're retainers. My contracts say that we're going to revisit the price on an annual basis.
On an annual basis. Does it also say, look, in lieu of cash compensation, we'll take eggs?
Well, there were times when eggs were more expensive than dollars, or more valuable than dollars, I guess. But no, it doesn't say that.
Okay. Jack, how do you kind of think about that? I mean, I'm sure you have high performers, or, they walk in every year, say, look, I brought in this year, I did that. I need to be, I'm the most important person at the organization. How do you kind of see some of that and as wage inflation just continues to tick higher?
Oh yeah. No. It's and in any professional services business, people is your biggest cost. And if you have people that are good, you want to take care of them. So the wage growth is something that's real, and you have to deal with it. So then you say, all right, well, how do I afford that, if you will? And it goes back to, Mark said this a couple times. I think I've said it once or twice, and you've said it as well, Mark, is that what you're doing with clients is you're selling value. Okay, you're not selling the person that's $500 an hour for 40 hours, you're selling value. So you need to be able to credibly say to the client or the prospective client, listen, I'm going to charge you $1 million here, but your annual revenues are $15 million. And I think if we're successful, we can get you and I'm making this up, obviously, $2 million a year of additional revenue for the next 5 years. So you have to frame it, that way, because if it's a cost, if it's all it is, it's about cost. That's a harder conversation, no question.
Sure. Mark B, I mean, sometimes companies, early stage companies, they just, they're focused on product growth, their own services. They see what we provide, provides as, look, it's a cost item. It doesn't, they don't sometimes see that we can enhance the top line growth. Jack has done a lot of work on the strategic side, and we're moving up in terms of us selling the additional growth potential. How does that conversation go for you as you are trying to explain, look, if you want basic cheap stuff, there are other people, but I provide valuable services to your organization that's strategic, recognizing that strategic is probably the most often used word in our industry, right?
Well, first of all, we have to understand the value of what we provide so that we can talk with confidence about the value. If you're not sure you're worth whatever it is, it's going to be really hard for you to convince your potential client of that. But it starts with really understanding their problems. I mean, people talk about understanding the pain. It's not always pain. It's their future goals, their growth. And then you explain to them and ask them how they're handling it, right? And what they're doing to improve, and do they need help with it? And honestly, after a year and a half of therapy with a business coach, he finally convinced me that you know, if 80% of the people you're talking to don't think you're too expensive, then you're not charging enough. So it's just an attitude change about it. But I know the value I bring customers. I know how to talk to them about, you know, how their family's going to live, you know, if they got hit by a bus tomorrow. You just use some of your experiences to share how you've made a difference in other people's lives. And if they don't get it, you're not going to talk them into it.
That's helpful. And because the question then becomes like, you know, if some people are just in that lens of per hour, I think it's time to move on from that potential customer. I think they have to kind of see the value. And because I also think as CFOs, we're also, we help during crisis management. And if you think about it, the hourly rate for a very good psychologist is quite high. So I think that should be built into our retainer fees as well. I mean,
Well, there's so much there. And I will tell you, I grew up hourly. I worked for KPMG. I worked for Duff and Phelps. I went kicking and screaming from the hourly model. It took me forever. But I'm telling you, honestly, it's better for your clients. They don't call you. First of all, you know how much money you're going to make. So now you are comfortable committing a certain amount of time to that client. So now you're all in and they're all in. Okay. Second, there are clients that won't call you for a problem because it's too small until it gets bigger because they're trying to save a couple $100.
that's a good point because like sometimes when you're in trouble, you're like, and it's like, oh, should I call the lawyer or not? He's gonna bill me some crazy rate, or
Exactly.
you're on the phone and wondering why he's not talking fast enough for you.
Yeah.
It's like talk
Yeah.
faster, I'm gonna get a bill.
Yeah. You've done this where you know, your lawyer calls you, you go out to lunch and then you get a $500 bill. And it's like, if it's in the retainer, it's no big deal. You don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And it was a valuable lunch. You just thought of it as lunch, but it was his time. Right. So I'm not disagreeing with it, but that whole hourly thing is really a hard way to manage your life. And it's really, you haven't done a good job of explaining that you're replacing a $300,000 a year person for, you know, $60,000 or $80,000 a year.
Right. Jack, you want to chime in on just kind of like how the industry is trying to thinking? You touched on value and incentive alignment, but just this notion of hourly. It does, and it doesn't have to be BCG, just kind of your thoughts through the.
No. Well, I mean, once again, you know, if you're, if, and then this is gonna be repetitive, but I still think it's relevant. I think you've lost if sorry. Law firms bill by the hour. I mean, you know, the example you just gave, Mark, that's the way it works in that business.
Right.
But, you know, other professional services firms, I think you're selling a product, you're selling an outcome. So if the conversation goes to hours and how many hours is this and how much am I paying for this guy and how much am I paying for that woman, you know, you've lost. And Mark might have been the one that said this. Maybe you don't want that business in the first place. So, you know, so you want to be able to confidently, you know, sell value and say, listen, my price is, you know, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million will give you more than, you know. And so one of the things that, you know, BCG did, and I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, we say that we will deliver value 10 times our fee. Okay, so then you try to shift that conversation because again, you know, as Mark was saying, if you're sort of nitpicking, if you will, over hours, that's a losing battle.
Got it. Do people come back and say that actually it did work out to 10 times, or I only got 8 times my fee, Jack?
So
That was just a joke, but I'm just kind of, yeah.
well, no, I mean, you know, obviously you're not perfect in what you do, but something that I was going to bring up earlier, and then the moment passed. But you know, if you do have a big success with somebody, you know, see if they want to be a reference client for you.
Sure.
because that can be very powerful,
Which
'cause
ties into Mark's NPS score. He's got to have a good
yeah.
NPS score. Yeah.
But for you to say, you're trying to win a client, to be able to say, listen, I've done this before and here's the outcome. Now, maybe for confidentiality, you can't say exactly who it was and what happened. So
Sure.
you have that, and then you have the idea of, gee, would you be willing to be a reference client for me? Which is, even if you were better than that promoter, because then that person can say, hey, yeah, I worked with Mark and he was great. And that can go a long way, obviously.
Got it. That's helpful. What about in terms of the initial engagement? Anyone experience sticker shock, your customers? And how do you kind of get them over the fact that, look, it's on an absolute dollar basis, it might be, but relative to everything else and what it might cost you in the future, how do you kind of get them over potential sticker shock?
Do you want me to join in?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Okay. I mentioned earlier that I do phases and actually teach people to do good, better, best, right? Good is something that's provides a great amount of value, but it doesn't cost it's not a lot, maybe a valuation at $5,000 to $10,000, right? So I'm getting in there, and I talk about it this way as phases. It's not a one and done, right? Let's start here. Let's see if we like each other. Let's see if this makes sense. Let's see if we can work together. Let's see if we can build that relationship and trust during this initial conversation, this initial project. Then I move into, from that, we have a decision point to go to phase 1, 2, or 3. So it's a little at a time. It's not like, all right, I need, and there are people that know they have a problem, and, for some reason, fractional CFOs can just walk in and say, I'm $10,000 a month, and it works. But for me, in this, the way I work and working with values and transition and whatnot, it takes a little time for me to build the trust where the client says, okay, you are worth $8,000 a month.
Hmm. Jack, there's a little bit of art to pricing these things. How do you kind of price it so that there's a good profit for you and there's good satisfaction from the customer for an engagement?
So certainly, if you don't provide a good outcome for the client, then you've lost, whether you make money or not. I mean, if you want to be in business for the long term, right? So I think I mentioned earlier that if it's a client that you haven't done business with yet, that you're trying to get your foot in the door on, you'll
Yeah.
discount. Another thing, which is actually kind of where Mark was just a minute ago, it's not uncommon for a consulting firm to say, listen, geez, I would really like to get this piece of business, and these people don't know me or whatever, so we'll give you a month for free. And then you'll take the first 2 steps out of a 20-step project, but we'll give it to them for free. And then if there's a comfort there, and this is the same thing that Mark was saying, then okay, I given, geez, I feel comfortable with you, I feel you understand the problem I'm trying to solve, et cetera, then the price point maybe becomes a little easier to swallow.
Good. Yeah, most of the time you just don't walk in and say, I'm the best guy in the world and you should trust me. I mean, it works that way if it comes from, going back to Jack's point, and that if it comes from another client that you did great work with, you're in 90%. You're 90% there. It's up to you to screw it up, basically, because you have a great referral. It's done, right? But it's crazy. But Mark, I saw a couple questions here that we didn't really address.
Sure, go ahead.
Somebody said something about KPI targets, and I agree with that. But usually you have to track. I mean, you have to identify and track and see trends. I mean, you can look at industry, like Mark Seuss said earlier, that you look at industry trends to figure out what there is out there, and the Risk Association of America has. You can buy all of these KPIs if you're so interested, but basically you're just looking for positive trends in KPIs. get, with the goal of getting within 80% of the best in class. So that's what I'd say about targets. Jack, are you good with that?
Well, I was going to go at it from a little bit of a different angle. So if you think of internal KPIs, right? I know, just given the economics of my business, if my KPI isn't at X level, I'll go broke. So you certainly have that kind of guidance for internal KPIs.
I love that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't go broke, right? If you need a 30% profit margin and you're at 17, you're just not going to stay in business very long. So I can agree with that 100%.
Yeah, because the KPIs that we manage the most were again some of the productivity things that I was talking about earlier,
Right.
and those enable us to hit certain profit targets, which enable us to invest, enable us to grow, hire more people, etc. So that's kind of the way we rely on them.
And in terms of where your number should be, I guess my thought is, look, it all depends. Your industry, your size, how long you've been in business, but there's some heuristics out there that might be helpful in terms of capacity. Where should your capacity targets be? Your realization gap to get better profitability. Staff costs, right? That's the big number. I mean, if you're at 80%, that's a problem. You want to get to a certain number. These are some general rules of thumbs that might be guiding you. And strategically, as we think about service modes, okay, it's like, well, anyone can hang up a shingle. You want to be thinking about your brand, um, your the high switching cost so that someone doesn't go from Mark's business to another business because he's ingrained there. He's a trusted partner of the executive team. Jack is providing strategic advice that's helped an organization grow and improve its margins versus, hey, let me just bolt on another consulting firm. You want to look at the process power, the ability to kind of process and get things done quickly and deliverables for your customers, and also network effect. And just kind of like, look, I have dominant resources. I have resources to experts, other people that I can bolt in. This is a team that you're getting, and I'm leading it. This as Mark B or Mark or Jack, in terms of how we can provide the best solution. So you want to be thinking about that as from strategic point of view. People resource metrics. Here are some of the the metrics for you as well: billable hours ratios, staffing ratios, and things like that. So this, while it's not comprehensive, it just kind of, and this will also give you in terms of where you are if you're a Series A, B, or early stage company, some of the that you should be on a relative comparison, not just on our absolute comparison to some of the people. So I hope that's helpful. This is a guide that I created, and it's just kind of like a visual presentation for the professional services organization. I took insights from Jack and Mark, and I added it and improved it. This is kind of a document that we like to work on and share. And I hope that's the presentation provided some insights to our audience today in terms of how we see our business, the professional services organization. If you're interested in starting something yourself or growing, we can be a resource for you.